Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is January 24th, 2026. And I want to start today by just, acknowledging something right off the bat.
Okay.
When you hear the name Harvey Weinstein, you probably have a visceral reaction. You think, I know this story. I read the articles in 2017. I saw the trial in 2020. You think you know how it ends.
Right. The fall from grace, the big dramatic crash, it's a narrative we all sort of absorbed.
Exactly. But here's the thing. If you stopped paying close attention 5 years ago, or honestly even 2 years ago, you actually don't know the full story, because what we're looking at today isn't just a story about a bad man doing bad things. It has mutated. It's become one of the most complex, frustrating, and legally significant sagas in recent American history.
Really has. It's good to be here. And you're so right. That narrative most people have in their heads is just the first act. What we're looking at now with all the source material from 2024 and 2025 is a story about the machinery of power and the machinery of justice. I mean, we're talking about a timeline that spans 50 years.
50 years. It's incredible. It goes from rock concerts in Buffalo in the 1970s all the way to a high-stakes retrial that just wrapped up last year.
A retrial that had, its own insane drama.
Oh, we will get to that. And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We want to connect all those dots. We're not just going to list the crimes. We need to unpack the rise of this indie film giant. We have to understand the specific mechanics of his fall, and that includes the spies, which is a wild story.
It is.
And then we have to untangle this legal labyrinth. I mean, it is a maze of convictions, overturns, health crises, and a retrial that literally split a jury.
It's a lot. And to do it justice, we've pulled together everything we could: extensive biographical records, the original investigative reporting from the Times and the New Yorker, court transcripts from both New York and Los Angeles, and importantly, the medical timelines regarding his health, which become a huge factor later on.
Right. We need to understand the man who shaped cinema for 3 decades and then, almost overnight, became the catalyst for a global reckoning.
The face of an entire movement.
So here's the roadmap for today. First, we're going to start with the origin story. The hustle in Buffalo, the birth of Miramax. Then we'll move into the Mogul years, the Oscars, that infamous nickname, Harvey Scissorhands, and the professional bullying that was, well, a giant red flag.
A huge foreshadowing of what was to come.
Then, of course, the fall in 2017 and the espionage. And finally, we're going to spend a good amount of time on that legal roller coaster. From the 2020 conviction through the 2024 overturn, right up to the 2025 retrial verdict.
Which is so crucial because that legal battle tells us so much about how our justice system actually works or, sometimes doesn't work when it comes to these very specific types of crimes.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's go back, way back. Before the Oscars, before Miramax was a household name, Harvey Weinstein was born in Queens, New York in 1952.
Right, Flushing, Queens, born into a Jewish family. His father, Max, was a diamond cutter. His mother was Miriam. And you could hold on to those names because they become the literal brand of his empire later on.
Miriam and Max. You're next.
Exactly. But the interesting thing about his early life is that he wasn't really a film kid. He wasn't like Spielberg running around with a Super 8 camera making home movies. That wasn't his thing.
No. Our sources say he was a hustler from the beginning. He heads upstate to SUNY Buffalo in the late 60s. And the notes here say he didn't even graduate.
He was there from 69 to 73. But yeah, the academic life just wasn't for him. He saw an opportunity, not in the classroom, but in the counterculture that was exploding all around him. He teams up with his brother Bob and a friend named Corky Berger, and they form Harvey and Corky Productions.
Harvey and Corky, it sounds like a morning zoo radio show.
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But they were serious. They started promoting rock concerts in Buffalo. We weren't talking about like local bands in a dive bar. They were bringing in the absolute heavy hitters.
Who are we talking about?
Frank Sinatra, Who, Jackson Brown, the Rolling Stones. I mean, these are stadium acts, and here are these college-age kids making it happen in Buffalo.
And when you read the descriptions from people who knew him back then, the template, the personality, it was already fully formed. A longtime friend, a guy named Jonathan Dandes, described the young Harvey as just aggressive and absolutely consumed by the business.
And that's the key word, consumed. He wasn't consumed by the music or the art. He was consumed by the deal, by the negotiation. There are all these stories of him arguing over backstage writers, fighting for every single percentage point of the margin, bullying venue owners.
So the playbook was there from day one.
The playbook was there. He realized early on that if you control the talent, you control the venue, and you control the money. And that aggression, that sort of bulldozer mentality, That was the through line for his entire career.
But the concert business is a grind. I mean, you're only as good as your last show, right? So in the late 70s, he and Bob decide to pivot. They start a film distribution company. And this is where the parents come back in.
Miramax. It's a portmanteau. A combination of their parents' names, Miriam and Max.
It's almost disarming, isn't it? Naming this aggressive corporate entity you're building after your mom and dad.
It creates this incredible contrast with the reputation the company would eventually earn. But in the beginning, Miramax wasn't releasing Pulp Fiction. They were just scraping by. They were releasing what they knew, which was concert films, things like Paul McCartney's rock show.
But then comes what I think of as the first real Harvey moment, 1982. This story really stood out to me because it feels like a metaphor for his entire career, the secret policeman's other ball.
Oh, this is such a critical piece of the puzzle. It explains so much about how he saw himself. So in the UK, there were these 2 benefit shows that were filmed for Amnesty International. Great comedy, great music, but very, very British.
Right. Not necessarily an easy sell in America at the time.
Exactly. So Harvey acquires the rights, but instead of just releasing them as they were, he looks at all this footage and basically decides, this won't work for America. I know better.
He didn't trust the audience or the original product.
He trusted his own gut more than the creators.
No.
Always. So he and his brother, working with a producer named Martin Lewis, they take these 2 separate films and they hack them apart. They completely re-edit them into a single, faster-paced movie specifically for the American market.
And the result?
It was a hit, a genuine indie hit. It made money. It raised a lot of money for Amnesty International. So on the surface, it's a success story. But look at the precedent it set.
Right.
He took existing art, chopped it up, repackaged it based on his commercial instincts, and sold it successfully.
Yeah.
It just validated his core belief that he could fix movies in the editing room. This was the birth of Harvey Scissorhands, even if he didn't have the nickname yet.
So now they have some cash flow. They can start acquiring deeper cuts, more serious films. 1988 is a good year. They pick up a documentary, The Thin Blue Line by Errol Morris.
This is a pivotal moment in film history, not just for Miramax. This documentary was about the case of Randall Dale Adams, a man on death row in Texas, for a murder he absolutely did not commit.
And Miramax didn't just distribute it quietly.
Yeah. No, they campaigned for it. Like it was a political cause. The publicity was so intense, the scrutiny on the case became so high that it actually led to the court re-examining the evidence. And Randall Adams' conviction was overturned. He was released.
That is just incredible power. They essentially saved a man's life through film marketing.
They did. And for Harvey, I think that was a drug, a different kind of power. It proved that independent cinema could have real-world political impact. It wasn't just entertainment. It was influence. It was a weapon.
And then the very next year, 1989, the one that changed everything. Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
Steven Soderbergh's debut. I mean, that film cost nothing to make, relatively speaking, a little over $1 million,
Yeah.
and it grossed tens of millions. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. It completely redefined what independent film could be.
It proved it could be profitable.
It proved that indie film wasn't some charity case for art house nerds. It was a blockbuster business model if you knew how to market it. And after that film, Miramax became, without a doubt, the most successful independent studio in America.
Which brings us to the 90s, the Mogul years. And in 1993, the big fish comes calling. Disney buys Miramax for $80 million.
A huge sum at the time for an indie studio. But the genius of the deal, for Harvey at least, was the structure. He and Bob got this massive payout, but they negotiated to stay on as co-chairman.
So they got Disney's money, but kept their own power.
They got Disney's massive checkbook and their global distribution network, but they kept almost complete creative autonomy. It was the perfect setup. They were playing with the house's money, but they were still playing by their own rules.
And this is when they become absolute juggernauts. Pulp Fiction, Clerks, The Crying Game, Good Will Hunting. The hits just keep coming.
But it wasn't just about the box office, was it? It was about the gold statues. It was about the Oscars.
Weinstein turned the Academy Awards into a political campaign, a blood sport. Before Harvey, you'd put out a for your consideration ad in Variety and you'd hope for the best. That was it.
But Harvey treated it like a Senate race. Oh, completely. Phone banking Academy members, whisper campaigns against rival films, negative press leaks, flooding voters with VHS screeners. He strong-armed his stars into doing endless cocktail parties and Q&As. He pioneered the modern, aggressive Oscar campaign.
There's a statistic in our source material that I think explains his ego better than anything else. It's an analysis of all the Oscar acceptance speeches between 1966 and 2016.
I know exactly the one you mean. It's stunning. They counted who was thanked the most from the podium.
Yeah.
Harvey Weinstein was thanked 34 times. That is the exact same number of times that God was thanked.
He was tied with God.
He is tied with God, and he was second only to Steven Spielberg, who had 43 mentions. But think about the difference there. You thank Spielberg because he's a legend who inspired you, or because he gave you your first break. You thank Harvey because you are terrified of what happens if you don't.
Or because he brute forced your movie to a win that maybe it didn't deserve.
Look at 1997. The English Patient wins Best Picture. Or the big one, 1998. Shakespeare in Love beats Saving Private Ryan.
A historical travesty for many film fans.
It's still debated today. But that win was manufactured by Harvey. He out-campaigned, outspent, and outmaneuvered Spielberg. He proved he could bend the industry to his will.
But while he's collecting these statues, he's terrorizing filmmakers. Let's talk about that nickname again, Harvey Scissorhands.
It sounds kind of funny, almost whimsical, but for directors, it was a threat. It meant he would take your movie, your piece of art that you poured your life into, and he would butcher it to fit his commercial instincts.
We mentioned The Secret Policeman's Other Ball, but he did this with major narrative films.
Oh, constantly. Look at Farewell, My Concubine. This is a masterpiece of Chinese cinema, a 3-hour epic. It wins the Palme d'Or at Cannes, the top prize. Miramax buys the U.S. rights. Harvey immediately decides it's too long and too foreign. He cuts 20 minutes out of it.
20 minutes? That's an entire act of a film. You can destroy a story by doing that.
And he did. Louis Malle, the legendary French director who was head of the Cannes jury that year, he saw the Miramax version and was absolutely furious. He went public and said the U.S. version doesn't make any sense. Harvey had destroyed the narrative continuity just so theaters could maybe squeeze in one extra showing per day.
It's all about the money, not the art.
Always. He did it with martial arts movies, too. Shaolin Soccer and Hero, 2 brilliant films. He wanted to release them dubbed in English like some old cheesy kung fu movie on Saturday morning TV.
That's so insulting to the artistry of those films.
It's completely insulting. The test screenings for the dubbed versions failed miserably, so he was forced to go back and release them in the original language with subtitles. But it just shows his mindset. I can fix this. I can make this more American. I know better than the artist. There's also the story of the film 54.
What about the nightclub?
Right. The director had a much darker, grittier vision. But during production, the star, Ryan Philippe, becomes this huge teen heartthrob. Harvey sees this, and he forces the director to do massive reshoots, to re-edit the entire film to make it a more mainstream, upbeat story centered on Philippe's character. The director's original vision was just thrown in the trash.
But there is one story where he lost, and it is my absolute favorite anecdote in this whole deep dive. It involves the great Hayao Miyazaki and Princess Mononoke.
At the Clash of the Titans, the immovable object meets the unstoppable force.
So Harvey acquires the U.S. rights to Princess Mononoke. Miyazaki, who is the genius behind Studio Ghibli, is basically a living god in animation. He hears these rumors that Harvey wants to cut the film.
Of course he does. It's a long, complex, very Japanese film. It's everything Harvey would want to fix.
So Miyazaki's producer sends a package to the Miramax office in New York, addressed directly to Harvey Weinstein.
Harvey opens the package, and inside there is a genuine, full-size samurai sword, a katana. And attached to the blade is a simple 2-word note.
What did it say?
No cuts.
That is the ultimate power move. You can't argue with that.
It is. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Miyazaki later said in an interview, "I defeated him." He said Harvey bombarded them with aggressive demands. He screamed at them. He threatened them. But the message of the sword stuck. The film was released uncut in the U.S.
But very few people had the cultural weight or, sort of a Hayao Miyazaki.
Almost nobody.
Yeah.
Most people just got the bullying. And we need to pivot here, because the editing room bullying bleeds directly into physical and professional intimidation. The source material is just full of these stories.
It's important to establish this pattern, because this wasn't just tough business, it was abuse, plain and simple. There's the story of him putting a reporter from the New York Observer in a headlock.
At a party, a public industry event. He didn't like a question the reporter asked, so he physically grabbed him, put him in a headlock, and threw him out into the street.
A headlock. It's like something a middle school bully would do.
And look at how he treated Julie Taymor, the acclaimed director of the film Frida. During a screening, they had a disagreement about the edit. He stood up and screamed at her in front of everyone, "You are the most arrogant person I have ever met."
The irony is just suffocating.
It's breathtaking. And then he apparently turned to her husband, who was also there, and threatened to beat the shit out of him. This is a grown man, a studio head, threatening physical violence in a business meeting over creative differences.
And then there's the story about Sidney Pollack, this one. This one really shows the utter lack of humanity.
Sidney Pollack was a giant, a legend, director, actor, producer. He was a producer on the film The Reader. But as the film was being prepared for release, Pollack was on his deathbed, literally dying of cancer.
And Harvey was still hounding him.
There were allegations, which later seemed to be confirmed by emails from another producer, Scott Rudin, that Weinstein was harassing Pollack and his family about the film's release date and marketing strategy while Pollack was dying. He just couldn't let it go.
He denied it, didn't he?
Oh, he denied it vehemently. He even offered $1 million to charity if anyone could prove it. But the Rudin emails came out later and suggested that, yeah, Harvey was being Harvey, even to a man on his deathbed.
It paints this picture of a man who viewed people as commodities, as tools. If you were useful, he used you. If you were in his way, he bulldozed you. And that attitude, that predatory mindset, it didn't stop at business. It extended to his personal life and his predatory behavior toward women.
Which brings us to The Reckoning, Section 3, October 2017.
It's hard to overstate how much the world changed in that 1 month. The New York Times' Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey, and then days later, the New Yorker Ronan Farrow, they hit publish.
And these weren't just gossip items or rumors. These were deeply sourced, meticulously fact-checked investigations. They had women on the record. They had internal company memos. They detailed decades of sexual harassment, unwanted touching, assault, and rape.
Over 80 women eventually came forward. Famous actresses we all know, assistants and junior employees we'd never heard of. It was just an avalanche. One story enabled the next.
And the fallout was immediate in a way we had just never seen before with a figure this powerful. The Weinstein Company, his own company that he built, fired him. Then it went bankrupt a few months later. He was expelled from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.
Which, for a man who lived and died by the Oscars, must have been a specific kind of death.
A total humiliation. Then he was suspended by BAFTA, the British Academy. His wife, the designer Georgina Chapman, announced she was leaving him. The Weinstein effect rippled out from there. It became the spark that lit the global #MeToo movement. We started seeing powerful men in media, in politics, and tech finally facing consequences.
But here's where the story gets even darker and honestly terrifying. It wasn't just that he was a predator. It was the machinery he built to protect himself. The machine he deployed to try and stop these stories from ever being published. We have to talk about Black Cube.
This reads like a spy novel. It's unreal. Ronan Farrow's reporting uncovered that Weinstein hired Black Cube, which is a private intelligence firm run by former agents of Mossad, Israel's national intelligence agency.
Former Mossad. So these aren't just some private eyes sitting in a car with a long lens. These are people trained in state-level espionage.
And he hired them for one purpose: to stop the actresses and journalists who were digging into his past. The tactics were extreme. They created false identities, elaborate cover stories. One agent posed as a women's rights advocate. She befriended Rose McGowan, who was one of the most vocal accusers.
And she got close to the journalists, too.
Yes. The same agent, using a different alias, tried to get close to Jodi Kantor at the New York Times. The goal was to extract information. Who are you talking to? What documents do you have? What are you going to print and when?
They were compiling psychological profiles on the victims. They were looking for any dirt they could find to blackmail them or discredit them and scare them into silence.
It just shows the lengths he was willing to go to. This wasn't just a guy asking his lawyer to write a threatening letter. This was an active international intelligence operation designed to suppress the truth.
And he tried to pull his political strings, too. The sources mention some very high-profile names being pulled into this.
The blast radius was huge. The reports state that he reached out to Hillary Clinton's camp to try and get them to help stop Ronan Farrow's story. Farrow was working on the story for NBC at the time, and Clinton's publicist reportedly tried to dissuade him from pursuing it.
And there were also allegations involving Jennifer Siebel Newsom, who is the wife of California Governor Gavin Newsom.
Right. Rose McGowan alleged that Siebel Newsom had contacted her, supposedly on behalf of Weinstein's lawyer David Boies, in an attempt to silence her. Now, a spokesperson for Siebel Newsom denied that, and it's important to note that she later testified against Weinstein in his L.A. trial. But the fact that these powerful names are even in the orbit of this story just shows how deep and interconnected his network of influence ran.
He thought he was untouchable because he knew everyone. He had done favors for everyone.
And for decades, he was right.
But despite the spies, despite the political connections, the story broke. And that brings us to the legal saga. And this, my friend, is where things get incredibly complicated.
It is a labyrinth. And if you're just reading headlines, it's so easy to get lost or confused. We really need to separate this into chapters: New York versus California, conviction versus appeal.
Let's start with the first big trial, New York, 2020.
He was charged in May of 2018. The trial itself began in January 2020. The whole world was watching. This was seen as the first major test of the #MeToo era in a criminal courtroom. Could you get a conviction?
And the verdict came down in February.
On February 24th, 2020, the jury found him guilty. But it's a very nuanced verdict, which is important. He was found guilty of a criminal sexual assault in the first degree and rape in the third degree.
But he was acquitted of the big one, the top charges.
Right. He was found not guilty of predatory sexual assault and of rape in the first degree. The predatory sexual assault charge was the one that carried a mandatory life sentence.
Oh.
So for a moment when that was read, I think his defense team thought they had a major victory.
But the judge didn't go easy on him in the sentencing.
Not at all. Justice James Burke sentenced him to 23 years in a New York State prison. He was sent to Rikers Island first, then eventually up to the Wens Correctional Facility. For a man in his late 60s with mounting health issues, 23 years looked like a life sentence.
So he's in prison in New York. The world thinks, okay, justice served, it's over. But the story doesn't end there. Los Angeles wants a piece of him.
That's right. The California trial, 2022. He gets extradited to L.A. in July of 2021 to face a whole different set of charges from different women. This trial covered alleged acts that took place between 2004 and 2013 in the L.A. area. He was facing 11 counts initially.
And how did that one play out? It felt like it got less media attention than the New York one.
It did, but the outcome was just as significant. In December 2022, the jury came back, guilty on 3 counts: rape, forced oral copulation, and another count of sexual misconduct.
And the sentence for that?
16 years. But here is the crucial legal detail that essentially sealed his fate no matter what happened next. The judge in California ruled that this 16-year sentence must be served separately from the New York sentence, consecutively, not concurrently.
So let's do the math on that.
Yeah.
23 years in New York, and then after that, another 16 years in California.
Exactly. So even if he survived the New York sentence, he wouldn't be released. He would just be transferred to a California prison to start serving another 16 years. It was the judicial backstop designed to ensure he never breathed free air again.
But then April 2024 happens, and I remember when this news broke, people were furious. They were confused. How is this possible? The New York Court of Appeals overturned the 2020 rape conviction.
The shock overturn. It was a legal earthquake.
Why? I think this is what most people don't understand. How does a conviction that seems so solid with so many witnesses just get thrown out?
This is where we have to get technical, because the law is technical. The Court of Appeals did not say, "We believe he is innocent." That's not what an appeal court does. It was a procedural ruling. They ruled that the trial judge, Justice Burke, made egregious errors that denied Weinstein a fair trial.
What kind of errors?
It all came down to the Molyneux witnesses. That's the legal term. These were women who were allowed to testify that Weinstein had abused them, but, and this is the absolute key, Weinstein was not charged with any crimes against those specific women in that New York trial.
So why were they allowed to testify at all?
The prosecution brought them in to show a pattern of behavior, to establish his modus operandi, to say to the jury, look, this wasn't a one-off misunderstanding. This is how he operates. But the Court of Appeals, in a very close 4-3 decision, ruled that this prejudiced the jury. They argued that under New York law, you cannot try a defendant on their character. You can't put someone on the stand and say, he's a bad guy who does bad things, so he probably did this specific crime he's charged with too. You have to stick only to the evidence of the charged crime. The court said allowing all that other testimony meant Weinstein was tried on his reputation rather than the evidence.
That is such a fine legal line, the difference between showing a pattern of behavior and just assassinating someone's character.
It's a razor's edge, and it's the bedrock of the defense's argument.
Mm-hmm.
And the appeals court agreed with the defense. They threw out the conviction, and they ordered a brand new trial.
But he didn't walk free.
No. And that is why that California sentence was so profoundly important. Because of that 16-year conviction out in L.A., he remained in custody. He didn't get to go home. He just stayed in jail, waiting for New York to decide if they would retry him.
Okay, so now we're moving into the very recent past, the retrial. But before we get to the courtroom drama, we have to talk about his health. Because by 2024 and 2025, the Harvey Weinstein you see in pictures is not the imposing, intimidating physical figure he used to be.
Not even close. If you saw the courtroom sketches or the photos of him being moved, he looked incredibly frail. The timeline of his health issues is a total disaster. In July 2024, he's hospitalized with a bad case of COVID and double pneumonia. In September 2024, he needs emergency heart surgery.
And then the big diagnosis comes in October of 2024.
Chronic myeloid leukemia, CML, serious cancer of the bone marrow and the blood. So as he was preparing for this high-stakes retrial for rape, he is also literally fighting for his life against cancer.
So spring of 2025, we are back in a courtroom in New York. April 15th, jury selection for the retrial begins.
And the prosecutors, this time, they weren't just running the exact same play. In late 2024, they had gone back to the grand jury and secured a new indictment that added and consolidated charges. They wanted to make this new case as airtight as possible, knowing they couldn't use those Molyneux witnesses this time.
And the verdict from that retrial, this came down on June 11, 2025.
And it was a mixed verdict, a split decision. And I think it really reflects how difficult these cases can be to prosecute when you strip away that pattern testimony that the appeals court disallowed.
So what was the final result?
The jury found him guilty of one count of a criminal sexual act, but they found him not guilty of another similar count.
And there was a mistrial on a third charge.
Yes. The very next day, June 12th, the judge had to declare a mistrial on an additional, very serious rape charge. The jury was hopelessly deadlocked. They just could not agree.
Deadlock juries happen, but I read something about the situation in the jury room getting hostile.
That was the really disturbing part that leaked out afterwards. Reports of extreme tension among the jurors. One juror allegedly threatened another during deliberations. It just shows you how polarized that room was. It wasn't the clean, decisive victory for the prosecution that 2020 was. It was a messy, brutal grind.
So let's clarify his status right now for everyone listening. Today is January 24, 2026. Where is Harvey Weinstein and what is his legal status?
He is incarcerated. He is in a New York State prison. He is effectively serving that 16-year sentence from the California conviction. And on top of that, he's now also facing sentencing and further imprisonment for the one felony count he was convicted of in the 2025 New York retrial. So, bottom line, he is not going anywhere.
And all the honors, all the trappings of the Mogul years, they're all gone.
Oh, completely gone. Stripped of his honorary CBE from the British Empire, stripped of his Legion of Honor from France, stripped of his honorary doctorate from his old school SUNY Buffalo. The establishment that once embraced him, the one that thanked him as often as God from the Oscar stage, has completely and totally erased him.
It is such a heavy, sprawling story. When you look at it all laid out like this, from the concert hustle in the 70s to the cancer ward in the 2020s, what's the big thing that strikes you?
For me, it's the duality. It's the absolute contradiction. You have a man whose company's name, Miramax, is on the credits of arguably some of the greatest and most influential films of the 90s and 2000s. Yeah. Pulp Fiction, Good Will Hunting, the Lord of the Rings trilogy through New Line, which he and Bob later acquired. You literally cannot tell the story of modern cinema without saying his name.
His name used to be a synonym for quality cinema, for Oscar-worthy film.
Exactly. And now his name is a synonym for the abuse of power. You can't see those film credits now without thinking of the abuse that was happening behind the scenes.
And what does this whole legal mess tell us about the bigger picture?
I think the legal saga, especially the 2024 overturn, highlights just how incredibly difficult it is to prosecute these kinds of cases. It showed us that the legal system prioritizes procedure over narrative. That line between character evidence and pattern of behavior is where these battles are won and lost, and it is a very messy, very gray battlefield.
And the network that protected him, the spies, the political connections.
That, to me, is the most chilling part of it all. It shows that abuse on this scale doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen just because of one evil man. It happens because there's a protection network, an ecosystem of enablers, lawyers, private investigators, PR people, maybe even journalists who look the other way. A whole industry existed to keep the secret.
So here's the provocative thought I want to leave you with today. We call it the Weinstein effect. We saw all these powerful men fall in its wake. But when you look at the sheer monumental effort it took, the years of reporting, the spies, the multiple cross-country trials, the appeals, the overturns, all of that, just to bring one man to justice, you have to ask, has the industry truly changed its structures? Or did they just remove the most visible, most toxic bad actor and then go back to business as usual?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is the system itself any different, or did they just change the cast?
Something to mull over. Thank you for listening to this deep dive into the rise, fall, and the endless legal labyrinth of Harvey Weinstein. We'll catch you on the next one.